definition of crazy as we commonly accept it today is the defined characteristic of being mentally unsound, marked by lack of thought, or driven by action which lacks sound reasoning. It is synonymous in use as a descriptor for anything erratic, impractical, or unusual in the extreme. It is by now, from habit of use alone, a genericized word made more mundane with every individual misapplication. The definition of a truly bad mech, as we commonly accept it today, is the character of being the Charger, or something very much like it. And I, for one, believe that that assessment is inaccurate for a number of reasons. The Charger has been called the grand incarnation of Abigor or Elegos in the history of the military-industrial complex. By its pilots, however, it has been called the walking target, the most cursed machine, the embarrassment made manifest, the mech that Graft built, and most amusingly, the second most disappointing thing on two legs. I think these characterizations, as applied to the Charger and without context, are not entirely fair, as I firmly believe the Charger is frequently misunderstood and often miscast with minimal supporting context as a machine that has accidentally stumbled into and somehow survived 4 succession wars, and virtually everything else since, as some sort of bizarre military-industrial cryptid. Accordingly, I feel a more thorough examination, a much broader context, and some actual evidence will help us refute much of the mythos surrounding this machine, and thus help us establish its actual place in history. And the real history of the Charger, or in a fashion, a much truer history, is indeed a strange tale. Like many set during the Succession Wars, the Charger story is not a singular cohesive event, but rather a scattering of burned notes and margin citations cast like radioactive ash on the wind, as in fact, they were. To define the Charger by the machine as built and leave it at that, a tidy sum of its stats and munitions, it would fail to explain how these things endured their nuclear baptism of fire, and still somehow continue to haunt battlefields today. Perhaps I'm old-fashioned, but I feel there's more to a mech than numbers. As frequently presented in a game of what if, or what might have been, the Charger stands apart as the assault mech everyone laughs at. It's the poster boy of Star League malaise during the Golden Age. It's 80 Star League tons of grade A Star League graft, with 5 whole small lasers as the only listed weapon system, operating in the capacity of a scout. As designed and presented, the Charger is unfortunate with a side of damn. And reduced to such a simple analysis, the Charger has been a standard for academics on the manifold sins of the military-industrial complex, and yes, while the Charger is a very useful study in those areas indeed, there is another and very crucial part of the Charger story. It's a story told in the margins of our shared history. A story set in the hard shadows of brighter lights. It is a story told between the graft of the machine as conceived and its actual end use. It is a story set in a wild and strange time. A time which directly shaped the collapse of our civilization as we knew it, and quite literally, all of the fallout afterward. This thesis, as presented, is a summation of what, and more importantly, why the Charger is. We will explore how, despite every claim to it being absolutely useless, this stupid thing may in fact never die. As we slowly place the machine into context one piece at a time, we will find that the Charger stands at a very strange place in our collective history. For it was born in a strange era, thrown into another, and then somehow, just like the rest of us, endured. On the matter of how and why, as argued by critics of the machine, I firmly believe the Charger to be a victim of that modern historical lens of plentiful choices and the infinite strategic arsenals of human imagination. And perhaps, in such form, the Charger may stand as an enduring invitation to remind ourselves that history is frequently not so simple as we make it out to be. To begin, we examine the roots of the Charger with its birthplace, a time so unique in opportunity and yet so contrasted in limitless graft. We historians gave it a label. We call it the Golden Age. The first myth of this machine, which I must now dispel, is the belief that the Charger was built in a time and a place that you can fundamentally understand. The Starleague at its zenith was a unique creature in history, and its relative, if borrowed piece shaped things in ways we today would dismiss as insane, or more likely, tyrannical in nature. But such is civilization. History frequently repeats, and cycles of strife are nothing new. Clausewitz wouldn't shut up about it back in the 19th century. His contemporary, one Antoine Jomini, had the same bug. Being extraordinarily militarily well-versed and highly paranoid was the height of fashion back then as it is now. Their wisdom still rings true today and is carried by rote memorization for every war college in existence. They say, dispassionately, that war is politics by any other means, and while the politics of ancient Terra were likened to gathering storms, the inner sphere doesn't make storm clouds in that sense, or on that scale. And sadly, as we have previously established, there is no substitution for an actual shooting war to define pure conflict. Actual war shows you what works and what doesn't. Nothing shatters illusions of safety or misconceptions of threat vectors like the sudden application of raw firepower to extinction-level scale. The existential issues and catastrophically understated challenges with trying to design next-generation anything during peacetime as well emerges sometimes in the form of a problem or problems for many lifetimes, and an expensive means by which to transport your fighting men to their graves in order to better cover up the graft committed by men now long prosperous and retired, if not dead, because anyone who could object was, well, yeah. So with no shooting war, the practice of war enters peacetime where, I'll be honest, anything goes. And because paranoia is apparently the most popular cognitive disorder in the inner sphere, it is very frequent that governments do not ever stop spending money on defense. We never stop making weapons, in fact. We just rebrand the product, or if that fails, the problem. In this magical place between wars, you will see any idea or program that has any possibility of working being thought up, planned, designed, bought, and made right up until an actual war starts. And only then do you see who was right all along and who was smoking crack. Historically, this interwar period is where you frequently find a gaggle of artistic statements shaped like weapons, and I'm not hating them, for until an actual war starts, all these ideas are just about as valid as anything else is. So how long was this interwar period? This magical age of fun ideas and whimsy, an age of prosperity and economic boom that was so unprecedented that they called it the damn Golden Age. 168 years of peace. Well, let's say relative peace, at least by inner sphere standards. But it was 168 years of what if. 168 years of decisions just like the Baron, decisions made and shaped without ever testing them and hoping, if the time came, all would be well. And as we well know, hope is a most fragile currency in the inner sphere. As far as why, war is mostly simple as analysis goes. In the strategic threat department, you know who's shooting at you most of the time. Peace, however, is another animal. All your former enemies and all of your friends are at the same table, and every private smile they exchange makes you so very glad you have so many nuclear weapons. And yet it is this very strange place of an enforced artificial peace, one built on lies and death, yet counterbalanced on the promise and potential of a hopeful future where we begin our story. It was a time so uniquely plentiful and yet unsustainable, we call it again the Golden Age of Starleague. And while many believed my earlier work painted the Starleague and by extension the Starleague Defense Forces in immaculate light, I frequently remind people my view of that conflict is related directly to that conflict, and not the organization across its entire existence. The Star League was, in fact, an absolutely grossly flawed organization from its inception as an imperfect Faustian bargain between nation-states. It was an organization predicated on false morality, with the factual treaty abrogation of the Ares Conventions from its inception as a unified military force, and then immediately followed by a disastrous war to pacify the periphery, and throughout administered via gross violations of international trust between supposedly peer states. But for the most part, there was peace. The womb in which the Charger was born was this vast, unprecedented period of peacetime, where military operations were at best border skirmishes to clap the latest warlord uprising, and with no real enemies and no peer threat to actually test your ideas against to be proven wrong, you can build whatever you want, so long as the customer buys it. And so, you have the background of events I feel frame the Charger's origin. However, there was one last lens to bring this to a clear focus, as to purchase something like the Charger, let alone full production runs of it, is a curious choice in an age of plenty and peace. However, I feel I have to clarify at this juncture, as you may have already guessed, the Golden Age is not pure. It is an era of few wars and relative peace. There are, as many know, oceans of bodies between those definitions in any era. And after the Reunification War, we enter this strange, artificially maintained, relative peace. And then things got interesting. By 2605, the Star League Defense Forces left the Taurian Concordat after policing it for a bit. Turns out you can't just say you win. The enemy has to agree, or they will keep shooting at you every time you leave your bunker. The Star League Defense Forces didn't understand that. So I suppose that the daily human body cost to keep Star League flags on flagpoles at full mast unburned in the Concordat was beginning to affect the overall recruiting pool, so they left. By 2620, Amanda Amaris became the second president of the Rimworld's Republic, promising, of course, a full return to democratic elections. She was murdered that same year in what I'm sure are unrelated circumstances, but I feel perhaps an interesting beginning of what would be a power struggle in the near term, and greater challenges later on, as we well know. Some would say the so-called good years of this golden age, in which the Charger was designed alongside many other great classic mechs, started at the end of what is politely called Reunification. For the record, I think that's fairly revisionist. Not in the professional sense, but a personal one. If you asked people of an occupied, war-scarred nation if the good times started when the war ended, I think they'd look up at you with hurt in their eyes and then introduce you to real hardship, because nobody likes an ugly tourist. In my opinion, the good years truly begin in 2623 with the Star League central bank and currency system, allowing trade from one end of the sphere to the other in good faith in one denomination. With this came enormous opportunity for anyone with guts and assets to gamble. As such, with open markets and unparalleled access to resources across the sphere, it was soon an economic boom the likes of which none had ever seen. It was a good time for most. That's why they called it the good years, and for the inner sphere, they pretty much were. I have an opinion on that which I feel may be unpopular among the great houses, but I am a periphery historian with a clan or ex-wife, and regret is not a theme of this lecture, so I'll say this. I, for one, think we called it the good years because, in my opinion, it was the point at which the great houses were most frustrated. And seeing the sort of shit they pull when they're empowered fully and completely unchecked, it was probably a good thing by default. And I feel the good years truly stop with 2 executive orders and a council edict. It is in fact these 3 political events in sequence that are the why of the Charger and every other single procurement decision the Star League Defense Forces ever made, until an exceptionally violent private unboxing ceremony put an end to it. While the Golden Age was good for most, the great houses were in fact, after the reunification, not happy at all about having diminished power under the Star League. As such, the great house lords, the very few people supposedly imbued with enough wisdom to understand the benefits of a security cooperation initiative which they themselves had signed and shaped, tried to limit the growth of the SLDF by preventing recruitment in their territories. Because that's what adults do. So Executive Order 34 fixed that, in theory, for a time. It patched the problem, at least until new ones arrived, which they soon did. The states of the Capellan Confederation, the Draconis Combine, suggested that the bulk of those volunteering for military service in the SLDF were criminals fleeing the law of their respective states, which was true. It absolutely was. If you consider honest criticism of the government and freely expressing your opinions in public a punishable crime. Executive Order 35 fixed that problem by saying that those so-called fleeing criminals would, if caught, be then swiftly remanded for prosecution, but under Starleague law. I see it as this: if the executive orders were the setup, the Council Edict of 2650 is the punchline. Strategically, these two acts furthered the SLDF as the sole legitimate unified Leviathan force in the inner sphere by manpower alone. But some people are not paying attention to a single word I'm saying, because all they heard was me say Amaris earlier. Alright, so, the Amaris family. We talked about them before. I made a list. The least of their sins was ruining Venus because they didn't understand how hard space was. They also ruined many other things, for other reasons. Then Kerensky retired him, and that was that. But the Amaris family has a long and storied history. And in this context, I must say that the founding member of that house, as a ruler of the Rimworld's Republic, was, prior to that, a member of a foreign intelligence unit, empowered during a time of exceptional national and international crisis that later and suddenly retired to the periphery, who then suddenly befriended and then somehow replaced the head of an existing dynasty for all time. It's, well, very interesting, I'll say that. And as evidence, the family has an interesting theme, so coincidence is a very uncomfortable word to use as a historian in this case. In 2650, the Starleague Council heard some interesting news. In a 3-month window, the Rimworld Republic, under the leadership of an Amaris, had gone from 8 regiments of mechs to 15. This was problematic. The 2 executive orders had, in theory, made the SLDF the sole force of power in the inner sphere, and yet here was an invested statement to the opposite effect. And as this is the inner sphere, if the other state noticed, they'd do likewise. Starleague regulations be damned. While the SLDF was truly mighty, it wasn't bigger than everyone combined, and it could not be everywhere at once. So rather than sending the SLDF into the periphery, which likely drew oceans of cold sweat from the officer classes who'd actually studied the last dust-up, the Starleague decided to bury the whole issue with a new law. And this law changed how many weapons each great house could have. And as you might guess, that number was going to be less than the Starleague Defense Force's stockpile. Your initial reaction is not wrong, as yes, it was a stopgap, and an imperfect one. It was an unwelcome addition to an unbalanced equation. This edict in theory prevented war, but it was a dream. A dream based on the SLDF of being able to do all the things at once, and if they failed, die trying to save the state. And to their credit, most of them did. But I've already told their tragedy in full. It is from this very place that the Charger comes from. With the great houses agreeing to the Edict of 2650, even if grumbling, peace was a guarantee in writing, backed by the Starleague dollar, held in check with the SLDF. And with one stroke of the pen, the Starleague Defense Force was by now, by default, the largest prime customer of all war material in the inner sphere. If you made weapons, your choice was clear. You could fill SLDF procurement contracts, or you could go out of business. As you'd expect, with all the money in one giant bucket and a prolonged peace, you have the exact recipe for what made the Charger. It was born in a world that was new and crazy and never sustainable. To prevent the loss of jobs, prestige, or to deliberately frustrate any House Army's secret rearmament attempts, the Starleague was now buying everything in vast quantities in perpetuity. Even in such a uniquely competitive environment, the Charger still stands out as odd, as though purchased sight unseen. The Charger rolls off the line in 2665, the same year as the Awesome, and yet the Charger isn't. To understand why, we must now sift the ashes of destroyed worlds to get a picture of the company that first put 80 tons and Scout in the same sentence, and then somehow sold it. Here begins the incredibly problematic history of Wells Technologies, which is very hard because at no point did Wells Technologies ever think about the future. From what I can find, any success they made was, well, more a product of their time than their actual industrial capabilities. What survives today in any totality is a decent record of Wells HQ and its place in history or modest fragments. But that's what happens when we bomb ourselves into continually shorter versions of the history book. I didn't say successive editions of the history book because that joke is too obvious. Moving on. We must ask ourselves, why is a company that made such a product which everyone knows essentially a ghost corporation? A corporation with no background and near zero track record of success or failure in any means we can measure aside from a single flawed product. After all, it's very normal when a large corporation makes a dud, or a poor product because usually they make enough of it for everyone to point and laugh at, and when contrasted against their other factually better products, they stand out. And there are plenty of other terrible mech designs that were never mass-produced, and so they slip beneath our notice, unless serving as academic comparison. But the Charger, they made a full run of it. For a nobody like Wells Technologies to somehow succeed in the market, that's very interesting. I cannot tell you much more about Wells Technologies other than they were, and they aren't anymore, and that their mechs and manufacturing lines still survive today. But after thoroughly examining the machine as designed, some details do emerge as to company practices and internal decisions currently lost to historical record. Firstly, nothing on the Charger is truly sophisticated. This was not brilliantly engineered. It is a big mech with the then biggest possible engine you could put in it. And that's it. The old ones almost look as though they're made out of castings and straight angles for cheap as hell mass manufacture or to be fixed with hand tools between battles. If one were very bold, they'd see the Charger and go, this is an upscaled industrial mech for moving large or perhaps hazardous objects, and considering Wells Technologies' experience in mech design being essentially zero, that is a fair guess as any. But it is just a guess. However, every design choice present on the initial model was made on purpose, deliberately, because the market was, at this point, the SLDF demanding everything. The Charger is like a blank platform to fill a checkbox and never see actual use. So unless Wells Technologies itself is an elaborate hoax or a fully wagered bet between eccentric industrialists to see what the government would buy in bulk sight unseen, Wells did this on purpose thinking it was very smart, or more correctly in acceptable industry jargon, billable. Considering they were purchased in a good number, they weren't wrong. Any further clarification from Wells Technologies headquarters is impossible at this point, as a variety of factors erase them completely from history, and I cannot deny, I suspect perhaps by a specific client. I'll get to that later. But whatever secrets they held and whatever decisions they made in detail will forever be a mystery. As far as Wells is and was, I believe they were more a crack team of accountants than visionary engineers. As we move past Wells to examining the machine in further detail, I will attempt to explain the Charger and its continued battlefield evolution despite an ill-fated birth from a company so colossally stupid that it succeeded at erasing itself from our linear measure of existence. Nearly every mainstream published opinion on the simple but awkward monstrosity describes it as nothing short of a total failure. As to why, opinions differ. Some will say it's a failure in military doctrine and that heavy recon has always been a crapshoot. Some will say it's a failure in design. Some will say it's a failure in concept or even, as I suggested, sobriety. From any way you slice it though, this is not a refined tool of war. This is in fact a sledgehammer being sold as a scalpel. It's sold as heavy recon, which is to find, harass, and survive contact with the enemy. And to do that, they made this. The stock model CGR-1A1, 80 Star League tons of grade A Star League stupid, or graft, or madness, depending on the argument. What I've found, however, only reinforces my argument that again, this was built this way on purpose. The chassis, why that's proprietary to Wells of course. Its tracking, targeting, and communication systems are forgettable marginal commercial products. The targeting system is likely just a bigger version of the one they put on the Urban Mech. It is cheap to manufacture aside from the power plant, which is horrendously expensive and thus subcontracted, and they charged a hell of a lot for it. It's more expensive than an awesome, plus parts. It has 10 tons of armor, 10 heat sinks, and 5 weapons. What weapons on an assault mech? 5 lasers, small ones. Some models put this in a pistol mount for the hands so you can awkwardly hold up a bank to pay for the fact that you bought a Charger instead of an awesome. And then there's the engine. Well, how else do you make an assault mech go fast in the 2600s? Wells solved the problem by bolting in the biggest, most expensive mass-produced engine put into a mech at that point. It is a committed, subcontracted design line for one application. The mighty LTV-400 began as the Charger power plant. So don't worry, it can do 86.4 kph all day. And perhaps not much else. It's as big as a building, lightly armed, durable, and mostly easy to repair, as aside from the engine, there was really nothing of value to break. At this juncture, some people will try and say it's a cavalry mech. But cavalry, historically or in the modern sense, typically as a function of stacking bodies and taking heads. Hence symbols like this being common in their lineage. And cavalry is usually capable of running an enemy down, harassing and killing them at leisure and then disengaging at will. Typically, cavalry shows up to a fight firstest with the mostest and then gets murdered until the rest of the army shows up or doesn't. The mech had the speed of it, but no real firepower, and no ability to accomplish forward observation or adequately relay anything it discovered. It in fact lacked all of those necessary systems, so people's opinion then changes, and they then find it to be a scout. But the Charger is not capable of reporting back substantially more information than anyone with binoculars and a radio. There is a minority opinion, one I hold in fact, that this mech was intended for a specific operations footprint and tempo, one best contextualized by the strangeness of the Golden Age itself. And in the Golden Age, large-scale conflict was theory at best, as the Hobbesian Leviathan was alive and well and being fed regular police actions, but there was grumbling. There were riots, and in the dark, far from common eyes, there were quiet wars burning away at the pillars of state. In counterinsurgency operations, you don't necessarily need high-tech weapons, just a boot. A reasonably fast, easily repaired, easily modified boot. A big ass-kicking boot to come in and put the fear of God into people for deigning to have opinions on things, or threatening your police force or raiding your supply lines. In relative peacetime, one of the single most attractive margins in the military-industrial complex is trainer/light attack/counterinsurgency platform. It's a checkbox in the military portfolio for the everything else aspect of war that strategic war planners don't like to think about, or plan for, or acknowledge, or learn from, and yet it is a capability they pay enormously for, often at the last moment and out of impulse or desperate need. Wells Tech was many things, but they certainly knew their client. The Charger wasn't for war, at least not the sort of war you see broadcast. The Charger was for dirty war, if any. It was potentially an okay trainer for heavier mech pilots because it wasn't heavily armed, or hard to repair, and fairly cheap to restore should they accidentally drive one into a building or 20. But it is deeply flawed even in this mission profile. At 7.5 million C-bills, the Charger as sold is 1 million C-bills more expensive than an Awesome. Not long after its introduction, the SLDF withdrew the Charger on grounds of its general crapness, and soon after Wells Technologies was in deep shit as a result of their rampant overproduction and grossly overinflated sales projections. As such, I believe the Charger would have been forgotten entirely, like the Baron and many other things, as an oddity of the distant past, if it weren't for a petty disagreement over who sat in a damn chair. I'll get to the succession wars in time, but the abbreviated context is thus. The great and mighty noble lords of the great houses of the inner sphere fought over the chair they weren't adult enough to realize was an inherently broken power apparatus that destroyed all who sat in it. They had watched the literal sword of Damocles destroy the Camerons, and then desired it all the same. The argument over that one stupid chair and the ruinous power it held then escalated all the way to nukes. As a cultural and historical context, the succession wars are what happens in the inner sphere when you try to hold things together by force, and then remove that binding force, just for those curious. Sheer destruction aside, it's reasonable to say it did a number on mechs. Full theater strategic response meant that any industrial plant larger than a backyard shed was now a viable war target. All those peacetime great ideas, and all the bad ones, were mobilized and sent to the front, without much, if any, calculated restraint. In many cases, machines and crews were expended for little to no long-term gain. Many complicated designs fell victim to catastrophic issues as just-in-time replenishment concepts were challenged by things like the factory disappearing, or the final assembly plant now lacking a breathable atmosphere. As things got worse, mechs were increasingly thrown into desperate gambles and sacrificed to stabilize fronts, or lastly, severely reduced in common frontline service as crippled industrial complexes were thrown into chaos trying to figure out how to replace anything with anything at all. Mechs, even bad ones like the Charger, were thrown in and held the line against all odds or died trying. The Succession Wars would know few old pilots, though it would produce many bold ones. Many recoil at the thought, but there is seldom such a thing as a fair fight. However, some people don't see a problem in having a fight against overwhelming odds. Some people, on faith, pure insanity, or balls, are willing to roll those dice and see what lands where, because what's the worst that can happen? You're already there and the fight is now. And maybe running away sounds exhausting. So for whatever reason, there is the challenge, and some will always rise to meet it. It shouldn't terribly surprise you that the Succession Wars had a lot of crazy. Showering warheads on populations like Mardi Gras beads does that to people, so don't judge too harshly with the lens of here and now. These were wild years for humanity, and people were just trying to make it. Civilization was, for all intents and purposes, along for the ride. With the Succession Wars destroying starships, their dockyards, and the continual raising of technology bases, the great armies on offense or defense had one option really, with such catastrophic shortages of strategic material, which is make do. And without the surety of plentiful mech support, the ground forces of the Inner Sphere opened the old infantry manuals and went to work. Soon, everything to them was an artillery target, and everything bigger than 4-stack bricks they pointed artillery at. Anything that looked like a mech, let alone a big one, got the full treatment, and any place that might hide life, they erased one fire support mission at a time, one grid square at a time. Mechs weren't gone, but it was far easier to put a man or woman in boots than replace a continent-sized industrial chain and all of the subject matter experts that made it function. And full strategic mobilization does its own wonders to warfare. So infantry did then what all infantry do when time gets hard. They dug a hole and they started stacking bodies. If anything other than infantry showed up, these weapons were their patron saints. The Demolisher, the SRM Carrier, the Manticore. The Demolisher in particular made most mechs go away with twin AC-20s and frequently in a majestic double tap. From the time you saw the Demolisher to the time it fired was the full run of your life in most cases. When mechs got more scarce, the Demolisher and things like it scoured the battlefield mercilessly, and often augmented by combined arms units nearby and some terrifyingly heavy artillery. It was a bad time to drive a mech or any big target, let alone an 80-ton assault mech with woefully inadequate ranged weapons, crap sensors, shit comms, and a big cockpit window. Tanks like the Demolisher were a centerpiece in this era for a damn reason. They work. They kill things very dead very quickly. But such brief, if inherited, primacy would not last, because there is a fairly awkward weapon system that can, if a pilot is crazy enough, stumble into, take a hit from, and then say hi to a Demolisher. This same system can then waffle stomp it into 2 dimensions. It can then find that one last guy who survived and decide whether or not to punt him back to his own lines before disappearing, war crimes unexplained, fading into the fog of war like a cryptid made of dying men's nightmares. Pressed into frontline service, second-rate mechs like the Charger were the only functional reminder of why mechs were scary, or even relevant. The Charger and its many equally poor second-rate friends went to war when there was nothing else. And amazingly, it survived. Mechwarriors assigned to second-rate machines like the Charger were considered frontline and thus expendable. Charger pilots were repeatedly run into guns, mechs, defenses, and naturally, most of the pilots did not come back. At least not the same as they had been before. The mechs, however, usually survived just fine. As far as why they were so consistently crazy, well, Succession Wars era pilots as a whole were a combination of alcohol poisoning, TBI scars, and a healthy dusting of alpha particle ash. If the notion of a functionally better battle mech crossed what was left of their minds, it was folly to ever hope for a better tomorrow, let alone a desirable outcome. During the Succession Wars, they discovered, at the bottom of the strategic bucket, there are things you frequently overlook, like the Charger, and they'll frequently do when there is nothing else. With the Succession Wars rapidly removing better choices, House Kurita bailed out the near-bankrupt Wells Technologies and bought their entire, unsold, previously unwanted stockpile of Chargers. They even made Wells build a line at Luthien to supposedly enhance and contribute to domestic mech industry. This would result in its own problems, but during the Succession Wars, any weapon that worked was frequently good enough. And doctrine-wise, Kurita had no issue running pilots into a meat grinder until either exceptional pilots prevailed or there were no more mechs to worry about. And as easily repaired, Chargers fit that doctrine very well. As such, the Charger of the Succession Wars is, in every likelihood, this rusty, dented kaiju of a war machine that's burned up 20 pilots in 6 months, which may come charging in at any time to escort you and your home team into the afterlife, or explode gloriously in the process. And this cycle would continue until the Charger produced a hero or became a very brief and very dirty star. Once upon a time, humanity likened such tragic heroes to Cervantes' own Don Quixote, suggesting that they were another age of hilariously tragic figures playing at heroes, tilting at windmills, and pretending they were saving the world. I can't really comment on whether art or life is more surreal here, but I can say this. Somewhere in the hell of 4 Succession Wars, where better mechs were slain by the score, somewhere in the fury of no ammo, no logistics, no spares, no reinforcements, somewhere in that realm of pure madness, where you are out of everything but the goddamn enemy, second stringers like the Charger started to take back the battlefield in small part by clumsily throwing hands. Just when people thought mechs were about done, the Charger showed up and punched them into the ground or died trying. I personally feel this crazy cycle kept mechs relevant in this era. It suggested that any mech was potentially better than none. And if boldly piloted to near certain doom, it suggested that a mech was a game changer in the right, if crazy, hands. Because to some people, the rare few dreamers, those few Charger pilots, the 1 in 10,000, they don't see the world like we do. To them, well, the sky is the limit, and space is the place. And they believe that anyone can be a real warrior of the wasteland, the Ayatollah of rock and roller, the cream of the crop, the hammer of justice, the people's elbow, that you, noble wasteland Mechwarrior, can walk into the consecrated holy battle of mech warfare like the third monkey on the plank up Noah's Ark, and brother, it's starting to rain. Unleashed as such, the Charger is an assault mech designed for getting in close and then reminding people that being beat to death with your own limbs is always a legitimate concern to have in a war zone. Without the encumbrance of weapons or any delicate anything to worry about, and being very fast and very big, the Charger was in many ways almost perfect for this incredibly barbaric age of war. The mech that was fast enough to chase down just about anything could absolutely, if the pilot were crazy enough, run around the battlefield punching things until they died, or everything else did. It was a magic time to be alive in the inner sphere. And by surviving long enough, the Charger reminds studious mech experts that survival isn't about being best, but rather actually surviving. As well on this topic, I find that the Charger is maligned frequently by newer pilots as they experience the machine through limited simulations or simulators that expressly forbid melee combat, as though the modern Mechwarrior is too genteel for such brutish pugilism. That or their employer doesn't want them to know that you can throw hands at 80 tons. And ugly as it is, awkward fistfights in the dark, that kind of war that happens when you don't have better next-gen anything because even food is hard to find. The kind of savage war when you're lucky to have a weapon, any weapon, at your disposal. It's a dirty way of war shaped by the lack of material rather than depending on its forever abundance. It's a way of war where the only way to stop you is to kill you completely. The realization that multi-mission capable machines mean jack and shit if they don't work brought the military affairs people down into the mud. It showed people what war was outside a lecture hall. It showed people what war was when all the promises of uninterrupted supply chains and force integration gets tested by somebody who thinks all your plans are bullshit and has the army to back it up. The dark days of the Succession Wars reminded war planners of why mechs were necessary, even bad ones, so long as they worked most of the time. As far as the long-lasting effect of the conflicts in military planning, I will offer this. Though now largely blamed for proposing courses of action, procurement, force design, and operations plans that realistically burn several hundred generations of human progress to cinders, I estimate the generals on the line fared somewhat better than their soldiers. I need not remind most of you that the numerous medals you see on any house general's chest were, perhaps once somebody's children. And sadly, there were a lot of medals in those years, but I would say a good number of them might have been charger pilots trying to figure out how to make the damn thing work. And perhaps a few more were those who did. While removing its pilots from history by the score, the charger survived. And because it survived despite endless action throughout the Succession Wars, they started to upgrade the damn thing. House Kurita practically had no choice, as they now sat astride a giant production line they bought on impulse when the wars started. And while the charger wasn't perfect, it came back most of the time. The principle then was the same as it is now. Clean the last pilot out of it with a hose, patch the mech up, and go again. And that, I suppose, is the enduring lesson of the conflict. That which survives is often, well, lesser somehow. And I think this feeling of loss is expressed in disgust pinned on the mech that managed to live when the good people in them generally did not. As a symbol of pilots forced to do too much with far too little, and the sacrifices they made to desperately hold the line, the Charger is a harbinger of truly bad times for Mechwarriors. While that old furious anger in donkeys leading lions is truly righteous, I feel it is entirely misplaced when laid squarely at the feet of this machine.
After going through space, water just starts to look a little purple, you know?
It just does. This is what happens, man.
I bet Commander Hatfield can verify that. He can say, yes, space will make water look purple. It's a normal thing. And, you know, Lord British himself who went to space. This is, you see, obviously...
He would know.
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, who are we to question?
Yes.
You know...
He's like, from a bird's eye view...
Mr. Lord British Richard Garriott. He must know how this works. Surely.
So Stag is your totem. He's your spiritual father and patron. And thanks to you guys putting an absurd amount of points into him, he can always tell where you are and always speak to you. So he's basically like the hint option in a Sierra game, as Mike put it.
Yeah, he's like
a bitch. I'm putting my points other places.
Yeah, he's like the hint guy from the Sierra game. So you wait till you hear what he has to say.
I'm rolling now. Location's gonna be left arm.
Oh yeah, that's gone. It just, and then it just jetting blood, and he's like, and he dies.
Drop your weapon. You didn't set it up.
No, you should have said, now you are disarmed. Come on. Freeze. All right.
I said to drop your arms.
Oh, there we go. But yeah, no, this first guy here. As a second-half player for the Succession Wars, there were better weapon systems in every way, and then out of nowhere, a Charger or some other second-rate mech would run up and beat it to death or explode in the process. The Charger was then the personification, one clumsy blow at a time, of how perilously primitive the Succession Wars had become, and yet, in the same sense, an endless symbol of endurance, of Plan B, of having everything go wrong and just throwing down anyways because making the enemy shit their pants and cry is more important than winning the stupid war anyhow. When Kurita was desperate enough for mechs when the Succession Wars hit full swing, they bought all of the stockpiled Chargers Wells Technologies had mass-produced and immediately threw them into the fray. In close combat, the mech had absolutely annihilated smaller mechs, which constituted most of what the great houses were using to replace attritional losses on a more economic scale. And after a time, the Charger was a combat-proven design that was a reliable, reasonable, low-maintenance weapons platform that could, if pressed into the hands of a select few crazy people, throw down in grand fashion. It was an infantry plow, or an angry dancing god of war that won fistfights in the assault mech range. Or it killed pilots reliably fast enough while keeping the enemy busy enough to find people who could. Because why not? So let's look at this beast. The 1A1 we've been over. Big engine, 5-hole small lasers. Next though is the one that somebody other than the SLDF bought, and I think it shows what the Charger could have been if Wells had any inkling as to the actual military needs of the inner sphere. The CGR-1A5 corrected the Charger to a proper assault mech, or at the very least tried to. The Capellans received a crap ton of military assistance and war surplus after the Third Succession War. This meant, as you guessed it, Chargers, lots of them, which they immediately re-engineered into usable frontline mechs. They downgraded the engine to a 320, which is cheaper and far lighter. They removed most of the small lasers and put in an AC-20 because that's always an awesome choice. To round out the weapons, they added 2 SRM-6s and a medium laser. Also 5 more tons of armor. It was as fast as most assault mechs at the time, while carrying assault mech armor, and was a nasty surprise for anyone who thought the Capellan Confederation lacked assault mechs, let alone good ones. The CGR-1A9 was House Kurita's take on the venerable machine through buying out Wells Technologies to enhance domestic mech industry. As such, the 1A9 was a Luthian Armor Works refit of the base Charger for heavier frontline combat. The 1A9 bumped the engine rating down to a 320 power plant, much like the Capellan engineers had decided, and similarly replaced the small lasers with a mix of useful long and short-range weapons, like an LRM-20, medium lasers, and jump jets for added mobility. A legal fuck-up with this model's licensed production rights would result in it being built subsequently in license with full technology handover for unlimited production by Ravina Electronics and the Outworlds Alliance. And that's how assault mechs show up in the periphery in numbers when they really shouldn't have. Thank you, Wells Technologies, so very much. Those pirates were always very manageable. Coincidentally, the original run of the Charger suddenly ended in 3030 because of war profiteering by Wells Technologies illegally reselling battlefield salvage to the enemy of the nation it was supporting logistically. That's right. After striking it rich and saving themselves from bankruptcy, they resold their license to pirates, then sold weapons through embargo, then finally betrayed their client. And I'm not saying this decision beheaded the company or anything, but the result is decisive. Wells is, and then very suddenly, was, or as House Kurita put it, an emergency buyout was exercised, and the Wells corporate board was invited to, quote, dine with their ancestors, which is the very last they're mentioned intact in any history I can find. The CGR-2A2 is the de facto periphery version. It's definitely a junkyard brawler, and then it has replaced the 5 small lasers of the original with 1 shitload of rockets and a medium laser to round it out. Why? Because the periphery actually has need of a heavy scout. You have 1 hellacious rocket blast sufficient to alakablam an opponent, and then follow it up with fisticuffs until friends show up. The CGR-3K is the attempted midlife refit by the Draconis Combine for the 1A9, but with an XL engine to bring the top speed back up to where it was at the cost of it now being very, very expensive and fantastically volatile. But this upgrade gives it medium pulse lasers and adds Artemis 4 fire control support. It can also jump 150 meters. All around, not a terrible mech. It's an expensive stopgap solution as a midlife extension for the aging Charger, with most components integrated for no other reason than this fits in a Charger now. These successive iterations at refitting the Charger were not wasteful, as they gave Kurita insight into successive mech assault design, which would help them later. The CGR-SA5 is in fact the badass hot rod version of the Charger. This bastard has a 320 light fusion engine and is slower than the base model. However, this is wonderfully compensated by Myomer accelerated signal circuitry, so it can sprint as needed. They also decided to save weight by burning money and fabricating a custom Indo-steel chassis, because why not? The SA-5, however, like all cool battle mechs, carries an LBX autocannon 20. It also has 3 ER medium lasers and 2 Streak SRM launchers. Held together with 15.5 tons of armor, it's all around really great. It also costs all of the money. You will seldom see it for this reason. But it is certainly and truly majestic. There are other approaches though, such as the attempt to turn the Charger into a full-on assault mech by gutting it and essentially starting over. This Warfront Charger, the CGR-SB or Challenger, punches the engine down to a commonly available Pitman 240. It has 15.5 tons of armor, and everything else is weapons. It has 4 large lasers, a medium laser, and 28 heat sinks. It's definitely a brawler with serious teeth, and certainly one of the more radical takes on the original Charger. As a stopgap upgunning of the Charger, I feel it is more a product of desperation intending to plug the gap of insufficient assault mechs rather than to excel as a platform. Charger chassis variants are their own special madness, with the Charger inspiring such Solaris monsters as the Cudgel, which is the way it is because Solaris. Murder is a sport there on nearly every channel, broken by advertisements for pleasures you cannot afford and should not rent. As such, it is the Charger made to beat people to death in grand fashion. It is a pugilist designed to remove Solaris gladiators in ways ancient Rome would applaud. It's designed for beating things to death. As they used to say, simple as. Off Solaris, and for those into asymmetrical warfare or just wanting to spice up the battlefield, unleashing a cudgel in a war zone is an interesting way to make a kaiju movie suddenly very real. The Charger inspired even grander things still. This is the Hatamoto Chi, and it is very serious business. So why does it look like a Charger? Well, as Wells Technologies had erred with House Kurita in magnitudes of failure measurable only in human screams, Kurita had a Wells plant and had been upgrading Chargers for some time. Having pushed the Charger as far as they cared to, they took the lessons learned and moved forward. The Hatamoto Chi is half Charger, half Thug, and a lot of Luthian armory gumption. It's also pretty cool. It's simple. It has 2 PPCs and 2 SRM6s. It's fast enough, tough enough, and expensive enough to live in the inner sphere. Also, most people think on some level it is, as stated, cool. So that helps it sell well among both hardened Kurita-aligned forces and really strange people making artistic statements on the battlefield. However, to sum the Charger up best, I'm going to tell you the story of a pilot who, I feel, encapsulates what the Charger really is. For, despite the grim years of the Fourth Succession War, one pilot made it through without a scratch until well after. Strangely enough, and against the grain, this thing sometimes has a reputation for being, well, lucky. Terry Ford was a veteran of the Succession Wars, and many would assume his hijinks were the result of some serious defect of education or general self-preservation awareness. But it wasn't that at all, because Terry Ford believed in magic. Terry Ford believed in the magical protective qualities imbued into the machine he rode. A machine that, for some reason, could tangle with anything, and despite horrendous damage sustained, keep Terry safe. Against the likes of Atlases and Banshees, Terry charged in with his CGR-1A1, named Lucky Number 7. Terry Ford survived the Fourth Succession War without a scratch, every mission, without fail, despite the sheer amount of damage pummeled into his machine. After every battle, Terry cared for it in his limited protective way, as it was likely then his only surviving long-term friend. As such, he rode to war with Lucky Number 7, surrounded by an ocean of collected lucky charms and trinkets. These too Terry believed in, and while he did survive the war, the Charger helped him die in the way he probably wanted. Which is to say, when encountering a longbow and outnumbered asides, Terry decided that was a great time to remind people of what a Charger could do. One failed attempt at death from above later, and, well, Terry Ford died that day, but he was probably laughing the whole time. Because to a Charger pilot, Any time is clobbering time. And while Terry Ford was dead somewhere in his pile of lucky trinkets, Lucky number 7 was taken from the field and rebuilt into a CGR-1A9 as rightfully one battle salvage. Yet despite a full rebuild, Lucky number 7 was different. Techs and commanders complained about how persistently odd it was, about its unfixable minor glitches and constant unsolvable malfunctions. It was, by all records available, from that day forward, a cursed instrument and a ruinous blight upon the new legal owners. Some said it was a lonely ghost in the machine, throwing hands the only way it knew how, perhaps clawing out in anger and missing its friend. The last account we have of Lucky number 7 is that it dropped out of the dropship during a combat drill for no identifiable reason, as though it too were finally done and decided to lay down. The Charger is most like that. It is imperfect, but it possesses through its faults something else. I feel it perhaps approaches the concept of character we know best, one derived through long-standing suffering, or, as some might suggest, a tired old soul. Despite everything we're taught, war is frequently won by batshit crazy as much as anything else. It is often not the machine, but the pilot which dictates the outcome of conflict. As such, I'll return us to Clausewitz, for he said, "Every age has its own kind of war, its own limiting conditions, and its own peculiar preconceptions." He knew that war was very strange and that each war inherently unique even back then. The Charger as a machine of war stands as a product of a time and a place so distant in memory that it has functionally faded into myth and legend. In that light, the Charger can be viewed as a peculiar mech shaped in its own limiting conditions, designed under peculiar preconceptions in a very unique time. And I believe that the Charger's marginal entry into the world would have been entirely forgotten and wholesale discarded in thought like so many other forgettable niche products, had it not been for the madness of the Succession Wars. That cataclysm was the test which allowed the Charger to find its true character, one of actual, demonstrated resilience, and despite being beaten down, always rising again. Over and over, the cursed design went through absolute hell, and no matter the damage, with a new pilot, some fresh paint, and a few repairs later, it endured as a steadfast reminder that mechs were the apex predator of the battlefield. Such maddening defiance in the face of the apocalypse, one that killed its pilots on industrial scale, might be called tragically heroic or perhaps apocalyptically naive. But this is a machine. So with the Charger, it's something else entirely. In the inner sphere, we have a word for it. We call it crazy. Crazy is about tilting at windmills, full send, and expecting the windmills to fall. Crazy is pugilism, grandstanding, and the macho elbow in an age of mech warfare. Crazy has no regrets. Crazy is that cheerful, enduring presence to stand tall and meet the next challenge, fists raised in foolish defiance no matter the odds. Crazy is what's left in the warfighting toolbox once everything else is gone and the fight ain't over with. Crazy isn't really about winning wars or conquering nations. It's about boxing the stars and the heavens and fate. Crazy is smiling at overwhelming odds and starting to swing regardless. Crazy is about wading into a gunfight with a sword and then winning. Crazy is about making your enemy use nukes on their own troops because you won't quit fighting and you're just too mad to die. Crazy is about having no weapons of any merit and windmilling your arms at the enemy until they get the message or put you 6 feet under. In that sense, I feel the common definition of crazy in the inner sphere as we know it is a barrel-fisted, 80-ton wrecking machine piloted by a psychopath fully intent on seeing what new friends he can make today. The Charger is precisely that righteous force of blissful, ignorant, cheerful violence, and in the right hands, exactly the sort of crazy solution you never knew you needed. But if you aren't afraid of the Charger itself, please do keep in mind, it's seldom the mech you need to worry about in this business. It's frequently the lunatic that finds a Charger appealing that you need to be concerned with. With that, we'll end this history. Just as a reminder, repeated filling of my inbox with suggestions of lecture material are being read, but I do not have infinite time, and this is not my full-time vocation for good reasons. The following artists, digital and analog, have greatly helped us with lecture materials, as again, most records of this era have been problematic, if not radioactive. Their peerless work has assisted this production, and many others, and I feel we should endeavor to always recognize them fully for their talents, and implore you to seek their work for your own projects. That being said, my team would flog me in my sleep if I didn't say the following. I don't shill, but I do have bills. Kindly and thank you. This is brought to you by you and nobody else. Class dismissed.
Howdy y'all, it's your old pal Bubba J talking at you. Today I'm here to let you know that we here at Bubba J's seasonal holiday-like headquarters have got you covered if you woke up this morning and realized, much to your horror, that you forgot to prepare and cook for the family you have coming in a few hours. Don't worry, I've been there myself, and after being in the doghouse for like a solid month last year, I decided that I will stop at nothing to prevent you from having the same problem this year that I did last year. So if you found yourself in a bit of a spot this morning, you can call on old Bubba J seasonal holiday-like headquarters over at 1-800-HOLY-COW. And we've got a handful of people waiting to answer your call in your time of need. I have assembled the finest task force of very reasonable husbands that are determined to keep others out of the trouble they wound up in last year. So here's how it works. You give us a call and you don't even tell us what went wrong. You throw your address at us at top speed and you write down the number that you're given. And while you're paying online, we will already be loading up our new thermite-powered holiday-like dinner package and deciding how best to get it to your location. Larry is on the repurposed lunch artillery cannon for long-range orders. Leroy has the Urban Mech mobile hot dog stand out front, ready to deliver anything that the targeting computer that we stole repurposed from a Rifleman 2C says that we can hit from the parking lot. And we have repaired the Spider Lamb for everything else. The Spider Lamb is now powered by 180 box fans welded to the outside, and this time the pilot didn't pass out when we fired it up, so it should be good to go. So once you get your box, you're going to notice the words "Caution Thermite." Don't worry, that's the brilliant part of our plan. So you're going to want to leave the box just right where it lands in your yard, and you're going to remove the handy provided sledgehammer and give the box a good solid whack where the X has been spray painted in large, comforting red paint. Now, within seconds, the carefully measured amount of thermite will get to work. Wait about 30 minutes and the glowing should kind of start to fade. Just give it a good solid hose down with your water hose until it cools off. Inside, you will find several sealed containers. One will have a seasoned turkey stuffed as full as possible with dressing. Another will have a ham with a package of honey glaze. Go ahead and pour that on, pretty fast if you can. There's a big container of my semi-infamous spicy green bean casserole. We got some yams in there, and if we got the recipe right this time, you should have some fresh rolls. If we didn't get it right, they'll look like hockey pucks. Just throw it away. We'll get it worked out for next year. So when you wake up in a panic, you give us a call at 1-800-HOLY-COW, and old Bubba J's Legally Sane Enterprises are here to help. And since I can't help but get caught up in the holiday spirit myself, the first 50 orders will have a gift-wrapped spider toaster to give to your significant other. Just pretend that this was all premeditated and wing it from there. That's what I'd do. do. And while supplies last, you can get our new extra bigly sized external combustion powered food warmer added to your order to fill with leftovers and kick the in-laws out with it. And as always, you can stop by in person and we'll hook you up right. So y'all come on down to Bubba J's temporary holiday-like headquarters on the other side of the Waffle House next to the putt-putt course. Just look for the Urban Mech dressed up like Santa. You can't miss it.
Oh man, that burger was fucking great.
Kødmaden af dit land er modbydelig. Smid den indpakning væk.
You're right, Swedish Pete. Let me throw this away.
Jeg er dansk, og du sviner.
Abfall auf die Straße wird ist verboten. Straftaten sind verboten. Ihr Arschlochschwenden macht immer Eiger.
That other Swedish guy sounds really mad.
Jeg er dansk, og jeg finder det modbydeligt, han sviner. Derudover, din frumraket er 3. grad, så er det en stereotyp, at vi alle er svenske. Ja, faktisk er det mit folks arveret at tæve den svenske del af Rasselhag med en kæmpe.
Hallo, hier spricht der Steiner Spähtrupp, um Sie daran zu erinnern, dass Fehlverhalten wie dieses durch wenige Sekunden sorgsames Nachdenken vor dem Handeln leicht vermeidbar sind. Denken Sie immer daran, Ihren Müll aufzuheben, falls er Ihnen herunterfällt. Räumen Sie stets hinter sich auf und beachten Sie, dass die Straßen kein Platz für schmutzige Servietten oder Pappbecher sind. Machen Sie hinter sich sauber, sonst müssen wir Sie gegebenenfalls töten. Sie allein können kostspielige Zusatzausgaben für den Straßenunterhalt verhindern. Der Unterschied fängt zu Hause an, mit Ihnen. Also denken Sie bitte immer daran, Ihren Abfall aufzuheben.
We here at Defiance Industries realize that there's a lot of sweet, sweet money to be made out there, and you have too much to do already. Let us take the guesswork out of your business. Trust us, we are the market.
Hey kids, it's make the military industrial complex rubber stamp.
First, let's pick an existing market. Next, let's pick a proposed solution. Next, let's pick an existential threat to really spice things up. Sell it. Make people believe. Now flavor it up. You need a think tank to make this real. Alright, choose a name that's vaguely patriotic or recalls a period when the client wasn't strategically inept. Oh man, now let's choose some offset partners for this dance. Oh man, now nobody knows who's making what, and that's called industrial participation. What licensing residuals? They won't measure any of this anyway, and you'll be lucky if anyone remembers who made what in 20 years. Hey, don't worry. You'll be dead by the time they figure any of this out. Oh man, now you're swinging. Yeah, choose localized partners and they'll sign. Oh, they need those programs badly. That's people's jobs, and that means votes.
This is Defiant Industries. The military-industrial complex would like to remind you that the universe does not run on hucks, and your neighbors are probably up to something.
Oh man, I gotta get this rental back by 5. Oh wait, it's a charger. This'll be fun. Even if you think the video's crap, you can at least donate to charity. I won't tell anybody.